We are starting a new year in a new series, and this last fall, we did a series called Design for Discipleship. It was really our spiritual formational series where we introduced the spiritual practices, things like Sabbath, fasting, generosity, solitude. We didn't go into detail into each individual one because I want to save those for what we're going to be doing for the years to come. And for the years to come, what we're going to do is we're going to take a particular practice, or what I like to call a rhythm, and we're going to spend a month in those practices or rhythms as a church community, where it's really going to be, you get out of it what you put into it. If it's something that you just do on Sundays and you come and learn about what these are and then just never put it into practice, this is going to be a long month for you. But if you really come and you want to be trained and you want to adjust and order your life around what it looks like to follow Jesus, I think these series are going to be hugely beneficial to you. And so we're going to take practices or rhythms and we're going to put them into habits and into our lives. And hopefully these things are things you do long past our month of focusing on them, but become integral part of your lives. And again, what we do here is we just give an invitation with recommendations. You have to make the decision to do this. You have to make the decision to want to input these things into your life in order to be transformed and changed by the power of Jesus' teachings and how he wants to really move through you and how you live your lives. So each one of us has to take ownership of our own spiritual growth. I can't do these for you as much as I would like to. I would love to be able to do these for you so that you grow, but this is really something that you have to do yourself. As we look at these types of things and we look at how we can be changed by the goodness of God within these things. And I don't think it's any mystery because it's huge on the screen right now that the first practice and rhythm we're going to be looking at is generosity. Generosity, not just at Christmas time, surprise, surprise, where we think about generosity. It is a hugely important practice or rhythm that is a classification and character of the people of God and the followers of Jesus. And as we introduce these rhythms or practices, these sermon series are going to have a very similar format to help us not only learn, but to reflect and practice on what we're doing here. So for the next 4 weeks, we're going to be looking at weekly rhythms and how it pertains to generosity. And again, my prayer is that this is just the beginning of something deeply transformational in your life. That this is just to kind of get it started so that this becomes something that you want to excited about doing in the rest of your walk with Jesus. And this series consists of really 3 components. We're going to have one component where you start to have a graphic here, I believe, where we're going to have you learn on Sundays. This is where you're going to come and learn about this particular rhythm or practice. And then, surprise, surprise, you're actually going to go out and practice it. You're going to put that into a rhythm of your life, build habits around it. And then I have set up a way for us to reflect, both individually or if you wanted to do that as a group or with your friends, you sure can. But these 3 components are really important if you really want to get all that we can out of this series. I have no idea what that just was, but hopefully it's a good sign. But we're going to learn, practice, and reflect. So we learn on Sundays, we put into practice during the week, and then the hope is that you will also go and reflect on what God did through these practices. And whether we're doing generosity, Sabbath, solitude, fasting, whatever that practice is, this is going to be the model that we look going forward. So let's get into it. The first rhythm we're going to be discussing this year is generosity. Generosity. So let's talk about money and generosity because I'm going to be honest, I hate teaching on money. I find it exceptionally uncomfortable, especially in church. I find it very awkward to talk about money in church contexts. I don't know if that's probably because I've had some very traumatizing experiences with church and money. So it's probably my own thing, but I have had negative experiences before as a pastor where my pastors have used, money to condemn, shame, and I've seen it done before. And maybe you're in this room and you've also had experiences like this, and you can relate to something like that, which again makes it very hard to talk about. But I can promise you this is not one of those sermons. Okay, I can promise you this is not one of those sermons. So you're going to feel condemned or shamed for the amount you give. We're not going to be talking about tithing today, nothing like that at all. I don't know what comes to your mind when money in the context of church comes up. but I'm betting that it comes with something, that there is some emotional reaction to money in a church context. There might be some of you who are excited. You may be excited to learn about what Jesus has to say on this topic. There might be passages you read and you go, boy, this sounds exceptionally difficult or exceptionally paradoxical to the way of the world. And you're excited to unpack those. Some of you may be nervous. You're a little nervous right now because we're talking about money in church context. Or maybe you're a little afraid because you know what little resources you might have. Like, what could I possibly do with money in this set of context? Maybe you're frustrated because money and generosity is something you've struggled with. Maybe this is an area of your life you don't want me to touch from the pulpit. You're like, no, let's just leave this topic off to the side, talk about something else, right? Maybe you're at that place. Maybe there's even apprehension because you've known people like me and had experiences like I had where money was used to misuse or to put heavy financial burdens on people. Maybe that's your emotional reaction to this. No matter what emotions come up when this topic, I think they're completely understandable. I mean, unless you've been in a vacuum for the last 20 years, there's a lot of corruption when it comes to church and money. There's pastors asking for jets and things like this. And I can tell you now, this is not going to be that. But here's the thing. Here's the thing that kind of motivated me to kind of get the gumption to start the year this way with generosity and money. What I learned was that as much as 25% of Jesus' teachings, so a quarter of his teachings, are tied directly or indirectly to money. 25%, that's like me getting up here once a month and giving a sermon on money. This place would clear out pretty quick, right? If 1 in 4 of my sermons had money tied to it. 25% though, which tells me, I think I was wrong in trying to hide from this topic for so long, for trying to avoid talking about this topic for so long, when I see how many times Jesus brings this up. As your pastor, I think it would be a great disfavor to you if I didn't speak on it, because our Lord has a lot to say about it. He has a lot to say about it. There's something deep within the human condition that's tied to money and generosity. And I like this quote from Billy Graham. He says, if a person gets his attitude toward money straight, it will help straighten out almost every other area in his life. I like that. I think that's true. I think that's true. If we can get our attitude toward money straight, it will straighten out almost every other area in his life. And I think that's exactly why Jesus spends a quarter of his teachings in this area. But I'm going to start off in a really fun and happy way, because there is more joy in giving than receiving. There is more joy in giving than receiving. As Americans, we were built on the slogan of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I remember learning this in middle school history class. This is what motivates many of our decisions. But what does it mean to be happy? What does it mean to be happy? What does it mean the pursuit of happiness mean in our day and age? Americans, we have a lot of great things, access to amazing resources, extremely privileged in comparison to other places in the world. But we are also one of the most unhappy people on the planet. We are one of the most unhappy people on the planet, according to most studies. So what does it mean to be happy? We have unlimited access to most things in this world. What does it mean that we are also unhappy? The teachings of Jesus have a lot to say about what it means to be truly happy. I don't think people necessarily look at Jesus this way in his teachings, but he does have a lot to say on what it means to be happy. And all of it is a dramatic paradox to the ways of the world and what we might think would make us happy. In fact, most of Jesus' teachings are a direct paradox to the ways that we think is right in this world, as many of us might be thinking about the world today. For example, we look at Matthew 20:16. So the last will be first and the first will be last. Ricky Bobby was wrong. Right? You guys are Talladega Nights, anybody? Didn't know you were getting that reference today, did you? So the last will be first and the first will be last. Tell that to any athlete, any person who is competitive in nature, that, hey, you know what? It's better to be last than it is to be first. Tell that to our American culture that's about winning and being the best. Jesus is speaking a direct paradox into this world. If I only could be the best, if I can only be the first, then I'll be happy. And then you read Jesus' words, where no, actually the first will be last will be first. This is a way of living in the kingdom. What about Matthew 23:12? For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Boy, if I could just seek that high position, if I could just get into that place of upper management or that place of power and influence, then I'll be happy. And then we read Jesus' lines, that if I exalt myself, I will be humbled. But if I humble myself, I'll be exalted. If I actually become less than, I become greater. A direct paradox to the ways of our world and what it looks like to be happy. Luke 6:28, bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. What do you mean? I can't get revenge? I can't get them back? I can't sit and just be angry with them and just vent about my anger? Oh, he says, actually, you should probably bless them. Maybe you should pray for them rather than feel that way. Again, the ways of our ways of our world are opposite of a lot of what Jesus is teaching here. Jesus' kingdom seems to actually invert much of our values and the ways that our hearts are inclined to find happiness. Even when we're angry, we can find comfort in our anger. We can find happiness in our resentment. In fact, we can find homes in those places that brew a lot of terrible things. And generosity is nothing different. Acts 20:35, last part of it says, remembering the words of the Lord Jesus himself, it is more blessed to give than to receive. It is more blessed to give than to receive. Another paradox of our world and what it means to be happy. Wait, happiness isn't found in just getting all the time and obtaining and having and accumulating? Oh, no, he says. Blessed it is to be the giver than it is to be the receiver. In a world that pursues happiness through attainment, Jesus teaches us it is far better to be the giver. In fact, the word blessing there is the Greek word makarion. Makarion, it's a very important word to look at in Greek because it literally means happy. It means well off. It means fortunate. He's kind of a paradoxical way of saying actually the happy people, for far happier are the ones who give rather than receiving. Jesus is talking about happiness here. What it means to be fulfilled and well off are the ones who are givers than receivers. And you're probably not very surprised by this, but modern psychology and research have proven Jesus right. That even 2,000 years ago, he was ahead of the curve. Generous people across all demographics, including socioeconomic classes, who are generous are far happier. Not only are happier, they're healthier, they're less depressed, they're less anxious, they have a lot more personal growth, they have better relationships, longer life expectancy. They laugh more. That's my favorite one. I think they take themselves less serious. They laugh more. These are what studies and research are showing us from modern psychology, is that generosity has a direct tie to how we live our lives and how we experience what it means to be happy. What Jesus teaches us is what modern research is just now catching up. What we are just now starting to realize about the modern psychology. That more money does not equal more happiness. That's what the world teaches. It's what most people believe. But what we see in Jesus is more generosity equals more happiness. More generosity equals more happiness. Here's a great line from Hillary Davidson and Christian Smith in The Paradox of Generosity. They say this: people rightly say that money cannot buy happiness. But money and happiness are still related in a curious way. Happiness can be the result not of spending more money on oneself, but rather giving money away to others. The data examined here show this to be not simply a nice idea, but a social scientific fact. A social scientific fact that what Jesus was teaching 2,000 years ago is 100% accurate, that far happier is the one who gives rather than receiving. Jesus teaches us that it's all about what kind of eye you are viewing the world. And it's directly from his teachings, is what kind of eye do you have when you view this world? In Matthew 6:19 through 24, he gives a profound teaching on this topic. Let me read it for you. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one or love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Or the Aramaic there is mammon, which we'll look at in a moment. So the question that Jesus is bringing to us is, where do you deposit your wealth, your treasure? Where do you deposit your wealth and your treasure? If you look at the first few verses here, your stored up treasure is referring to those extra things, those wealth things that we might call wealth. The things that you store up for yourselves in case of a rainy day or in case of a famine or in case of whatever that might be, for those extra days. Really what he's hitting at here is the sense of what gives you the sense of security and importance, and wealth often has that component. When we find security by opening up our savings accounts and going, whew, good, I got my wealth. Or when you look at how valuable you feel because of how much your net worth might be, is exactly where Jesus is starting to touch in the vulnerability of the human soul. We kind of think to ourselves, if I can just have that security blanket, if I can just have that financial buffer, maybe that level of influence that my net worth carries with it, then I will be happy. We've all thought this. We've all been tempted by this. We've all done this, and we're all doing this. We've all struggled with this. Here Jesus highlights clothing and our valuables in our home, and this is on purpose. Clothing in the first century in the ancient world was an easy way to show one's value. You were pretty fortunate to have a couple of garments. If you had one garment, that was mainly what you had. If you were a kind of a normal class citizen of Judea, you maybe had one or two garments at the most. But the rich, the wealthy, often had many garments. They might have a lot of clothing. They may have a lot of value and wealth in what they wear. It was a sign of wealth. You know, there were no bank accounts in the ancient world. No one went and deposited their savings or their wealth in different bank deposits, the Bank of Rome or anything that didn't exist. People would store all of their wealth on themselves or in big jars usually. If you ever go to Pompeii, you find the tragedy of those who didn't make it out. They're wearing their wealth. We find it on them. It's in their pockets, it's on their jewelry, it's on their rings. They're trying to get out of the city that's getting destroyed by a volcano, and they're carrying their wealth with them. There was no place. You had to keep it in your house or on you. It's like someone breaking in and stealing all of your retirement or your vacation money tomorrow. Imagine if someone just went in and ripped everything out of your 401k tomorrow. I bet your initial reaction would not be a good one, right? Or it completely eliminated your savings account. You woke up tomorrow, opened up that account on your phone, and it said $0. Most of us would probably panic, right? This is the kind of thing he's thinking about. Jesus calls these things our treasure. And he is tapping deep into the human vulnerability that is found in putting our hope and security in such things. Classic Jesus, going straight for the jugular and how we find our hope and security within our finances, our wealth, and our money. Those things we work our entire lives to obtain, he says, can be gone or destroyed easily and as simply as moths or robbers. As moths and robbers, those things can be gone. So what then? What then to live in a way where we don't have the fear and anxiety of losing everything? always afraid of losing what we have or maybe not having enough. If I just had a little bit more, if I could just get a little bit more to that level. Most of you who are maybe at retirement, remember having those days. If I could just work maybe one more year and get to this level, we can have this type of retirement or this type of life after we're done. Instead, he says, store up those things, not on earth, not in the temporary, not in those things that are going to be easily stolen or destroyed by moths and robbers. He says, no, store up those things in heaven. This is a euphemism for God. Store up those things in God. He's not talking about, just literal mansions full of money, okay? That's a common misconception. A euphemism for store up those things in God. Find your treasure and how you deposit your wealth, your treasure, those extra things, in the things that are going to develop the eternity of the kingdom of God. Store up those things in what is really important, which is the eternal kingdom of God. He says, stop thinking about how you can put the wealth and your treasure in things that are temporary, but rather put those things in the eternal. Don't find your hope and security in things that are temporary. You will be dramatically disappointed and discouraged and always left wanting more, which is going to lead to deep-rooted unhappiness. It will waste away. It will be squandered. It may not even be squandered by you, but the next generation very well might, as history continuously shows us. Instead, invest your treasure in the things God desires. And he desires your hope. He desires your trust. He desires you to look at him and go, you are everything that I have. I cannot depend on anything else except for you. That's exactly where he wants you. Most of you had got to go through a lot to get there because he's had to take away some things in order for you to see it. And he does that. So how does one do that? How does one store up treasures in heaven rather than treasures on earth? Well, Jesus says the answer is you got to have healthy eyes versus unhealthy eyes. Healthy eyes versus unhealthy eyes. In verse 22, it says the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Healthy eyes is an idiomatic phrase for being generous. Healthy eyes is an idiomatic phrase for being generous. Unhealthy eyes is the same idiomatic phrase for being stingy or greedy. So Jesus is saying, do you have healthy eyes? Do you view the way of the world in a healthy way, or do you view the things in an unhealthy way? Healthy eyes focus on God's abundance, whereas unhealthy eyes focus on one's scarcity. One's scarcity versus God's abundance. For example, a healthy eye sees God as their father and provider. Are you not a child of the living God? Are you not one who looks at him as a father, as a provider? And I have young kids. None of them are worried about paying the mortgage because they have a mother and a father who provide for them. Life is a gift from God in a healthy view. You look at life, you go, boy, I can't believe I get to live in existence to this. I can't believe that I get to live this life with God. There is enough for everyone. We have a mindset of saying, boy, there is a lot out there and there is enough for everyone. We have gratitude towards God for everything that he has given us, even our hard times and our good times. And that leads to a generosity towards their neighbor, a generosity of wanting to give to those around us, to give to those who are in need, and they give to those who are focused on the eternal kingdom of the living God. Someone in the first century would look at that person who lives this way and go, oh, that's a healthy view of the world. That's a healthy eye. Someone who lives this way is a healthy eye. And likewise, if an unhealthy eye, what they would tend to think is they have a world of lack. Everything is scarcity. I got to get what's mine because it's so limited in the world. There's no provider. You're on your own. Figure it out. You got to make it happen, right? You might think in your head, yeah, God's my provider, but when you get out into the world, then it's all about what you can do to provide for yourself. The world is full of people who want what you have, is that mindset. Everyone's just after my money. Everyone's after what I have. about wealth as a zero-sum game. Let's always look out for number one first. Yeah, I'll care for the poor, but I got to make sure I have my vacations first. I have to make sure I have what I need first in order to give. Now, there is a healthy component here where Amy and I call it putting on your life mask. Like, if in order to give, you also have to make sure that you're breathing right? Like making sure your kids are taken care of. There is a component to that, but this unhealthy view is also really about, just making sure everything that you have is taken care of. It's kind of a negative approach to that. Vision is set on the fear of losing what you have or only wanting more. So your unhealthy eye is you're set on the fear of losing what you have more than anything else, or even just the desire for wanting more. I have to have more. I have to have more. In the world of the first century, in the way of Jesus, he would have said, you have an unhealthy eye. This is someone who will perpetually be unhappy and will cause a lot of damage in the world. And it's not hard to look at history of humanity and see how many unhealthy eyes have destroyed human lives, and human cultures. He says, how great is that darkness? Those are those who use their wealth to squash others or for their own gain, who is afraid of losing, so they distrust everyone. How many millions of people have lost their lives because of people with unhealthy eyes? How many leaders with power have looked at the world and said, I want more at the sake of human lives? This is what Jesus is thinking about when he's saying unhealthy eyes. How great is that darkness? How great is that darkness of greed and scarcity? Who doesn't see the healthy view of the world? This is why Jesus finishes his thought with this in verse 24. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one or you will love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and mammon, both God and money. You cannot serve both God and mammon. Jesus taught mostly like in Aramaic, but Matthew here is writing in Greek, so he's translating some of what Jesus is saying here, but he leaves the word money there, word mammon, in Aramaic. He leaves it. Because in Aramaic, the word mammon was the Syrian god for wealth and riches. Wealth and riches. And so what Jesus is saying here is you cannot serve God in wealth and riches. It's not saying that you shouldn't. Hey, it's a really good idea that you don't. Hey, you'll be really unhappy if you do this, or it'd be unlikely you'll see some good things if you do. He says, no. It's impossible. You cannot serve wealth and money and God at the same time. You have to have a healthy view. You have to have a healthy eye if you're going to serve God. He knows well the human condition. We will either pursue our own wealth and treasure, mostly at the cost of other human lives, leading to others' destruction and our own destruction eventually, our unhappiness and that of each other, or we will turn to generosity, looking out for one another, caring for one another, looking at how there is enough to go around. When we choose generosity, we are serving God in a way that reflects his character into the world. Because one of the main characteristics of God is easy to see is generosity. Absolute sacrificial generosity is one of the key characteristics of who our God is. I mean, it's as simple as this. It's as simple as everyone here just take a breath. That was a gift. The gift of being able to breathe is a generous giving from our God. The fact that we have food that grows out of the ground from a little tiny seed that we can harvest once a year is a gift from our God. Our minds that we have to reason, and our hands to work and to even gain our wealth is a gift from God. It goes all the way back to the source of who is actually the one giving here. Who is the one giving and providing and supplying this world with the life that it has? All of this is a gift from God. Our God is an absolute, generous, loving, providing God who gives us everything we need. It's just as the people, are we going to steward it that way, in a similar way that reflects out the goodness of God? And Jesus asks us, do you believe this? Yeah, I know generosity is good, but do you really believe this? Do you see this as something that is transformative in your life to the point where you want to make it a way of life? If a group of humans get this, it would change everything. Because this is so paradoxical to the ways of the world. So paradoxical to how many of us were raised and as we grew up. So paradoxical to how many of our minds of the world would think. But it's the way of Jesus. How would your life be different if you were free of the fear of not having enough? How would your life be different if you were free of the fear of not having enough? This is what generosity, the practice of generosity can bring. It can bring liberation and freedom from that fear of not having enough. So how do we put this into practice? Putting generosity into practice. So let's take it now from the intellectual. Now that I've beaten you down a little bit, let's mold you into people who want to practice generosity. How do we make this into the practical? Well, two things. And I'm really excited about this first one because this is a total God thing. I was planning on doing this series, probably back in the early fall. Like this is where we're going to start 2025 with. And then a generous family in our church, speaking of that, and this completely unrelated. They had no idea we were talking about this. But a generous family in our church is gifting something really special to our church for every single person here today and who comes to Real Life Church. They have paid for a yearly subscription to Right Now Media. Right Now Media. And if you're not familiar with that, it's like the Christian Netflix. It's got over 20,000 videos. That's a video library it's free and fully accessible to every single one of us here at Real Life Church. It's got Bible studies, it's got kids shows. I mean, I'm not gonna name off all 20,000 videos, but you can imagine, there's a lot, okay? This was a huge act of generosity by this particular family, and I'm very grateful, and I hope this helps you. This is a great resource to do your own personal studies with. I'm sure we're gonna use it for classroom material here at church. Please use this for your own discipleship and development. There are a lot of great things on this. I've used this resource before, it's fantastic. Some great teachers, really well done studies. So we have a QR code, so if you are going, and I hope you do use this, there's a QR code that you can obviously use right now and you can grab it. Also, if you go to the Connect desk, you'll find these papers. So there's a gift from our church on them. Go ahead, there's a QR code on that as well, and that will get you access through the Real Life Church portal to Right Now Media. So this is a fantastic resource, and I was exceptionally blessed around this generous gift that we got as a church. Amazing. So I'm really excited about that one. I'm already set up. I've been watching. It's been great. I've been binging all Christmas. I got the early view here. It's completely free to us. Now, for all of us who want to put into rhythm this week generosity, here is our practice this week. Every week we're going to have a practice that we do together, a rhythm that we do together. Your practice this week is for one act of spontaneous generosity. One act of spontaneous generosity. I want you to pray about a set number. Maybe it can be $1 for all I care. Whatever you really pray about it, like what do I want to set aside this week for my spontaneous act of generosity? What do I want to set aside this week that's specifically devoted to just having in my pocket or ready to go on my card that when I see the moment, I'm ready to act. I'm ready to give that money away. Pray about it. Find a set amount that you want to give away. Have it ready so when the time comes, you'll be ready to do it. Again, this is as simply as buying a coffee for the person behind you in line, paying for a meal for someone at a different table, giving it to a friend who might be in need. You maybe get a text from somebody, here I set aside this $20 just for this, right? Purchasing groceries for someone. Be creative. This is where you get to have fun. This is where you get to let God pour into this opportunity into your life. When you set aside just a sum of money, it doesn't matter how much. It really doesn't. But when you set aside a sum of money that says, this is what I'm going to give this week to whatever comes up, this is going to be fun. And it is fun. You know, for some of us, we do this already. Some of us are already very generous. I am blessed to say that we are a very generous church already. But for those of us who are maybe generous and want a little bit extra stretch to their exercise, here's this one. Up the frequency to 2 or 3 times this week. Maybe you set aside $20, but then you break it up. You say, I'm going to do 10, 5, whatever. Break it up. Do it 2 or 3 times. Do it every day. I don't care. It's great. You're going to be happier. But do it as a stretch exercise. If you're not someone who's doing this, maybe start with the 1. Start small. But if you're someone who does this quite often already or is already kind of a generous, stretch it out a little bit. Push yourself a little bit more to think about how we can be more frequent. Or up the intensity of your generosity. Maybe up the intensity of it. Take money that you stored away maybe for a rainy day, maybe for that new cool e-bike, and give it away. See what happens. I'm telling you right now, you will be blessed. Stretch yourselves. Give it to the poor. Give it to the church. Give it to someone. Give it to the gospel. Give it to a mission gospel that you really care about. I don't care where you give it. Just give it to somewhere that's going to expand and love and live for the kingdom of God. You guys on board for that? Challenge accepted? Yes. And now this is the last one is reflect. After you do that, I want you to reflect. Now we've created a form for you to reflect in. Again, I love QR codes. I found out how to make them this week, so you're getting a lot of them. Corbin's out of town, so I was on my own. So we're gonna have this here on the QR code. We're also gonna have it online. We'll have it in the app as well. But this is your reflection form. So you can use this to write out how you felt. I want you to write out your experiences. I want you to really wrestle with what was hard about it, what was good about it. You know, they're gonna come to us as pastors and they're gonna be completely anonymous. But I would also love to share some of the stories that come out of this group of what God has done in this practice. Tell us about what it was like to give, to be generous for a week as we look at this. So this is an important part. Not only are we learning and we're practicing, but we're also reflecting. I think reflecting is really helpful in how we kind of process the experience. And we're gonna process that together. And maybe you grab a friend, you grab, do as a spouse or someone, and you just kind of do this together. Maybe you go and you're generous, you go have coffee later in the week and you sit down and you process and reflect it together. There's a lot of fun things you guys can do with this. So as I'll end this, my prayer again is not that I'm putting any kind of financial burden. I'm not trying to put more on your plate or already stretch limited resources that you guys have. I'm not trying to do any of that. All I'm trying to do is to get you to see the joy of giving more than receiving. And I know we just got out of Christmas and you're like, I just gave the whole house away, right? But it's so much bigger than that. It's so much greater than that. And it has very little to do with the amount you give. We should never forget about the widow who gave the only penny she had, and Jesus called her blessed. Generosity is far more greater than anything that we tend to really give it value to. So let's go practice generosity together. Amen?